All right, y'all. So I think a lot of us have heard about the Robert Morris story that has come out just recently, right? I think it's a lot worse than we initially thought it was, and it was already extremely bad when it was first reported. But now I think people are starting to realize how bad it actually was slash is. Now, I believe this was the original source that reported on it. This is from the Wartburg Watch. And it says there's an update. I was 12 years old and I was wearing my pink pajamas when Robert Morris, now of Gateway Church, began to molest me. The alleged abuse lasted for 4.5 years. So she was 12 years old. And at first, they kind of came out, and I believe they said that he was like grooming her, but they were very, unspecific as to what that meant. And now it comes out that there was actual assault involved, and she was only 12 years old, and he was in his 20s, early 20s. Um, it also came out that I guess he was a traveling evangelist during this time. He acquired a relationship with the girl's parents, and he would stay at their house, when he was traveling and doing youth camps and youth ministry and things like that. And he would sleep in the girl's bedroom. So it was the 12-year-old girl who he assaulted. Her name is Cindy. And then her sister. So they shared a bedroom. But when Robert would come into town, he would sleep in the girl's bedroom and the girls would sleep on the couch or something like that. But one of the nights, ironically, on Christmas night, Robert calls Cindy into the bedroom, her bedroom where he was staying, and begins to touch her and begins to essentially assault her. Now, on the Wartburg Watch, they found a very interesting clip from one of his sermons. This is from 2014. Ironically, it's called Room 12 Rebellious Roots. And he's talking about some of his sexual sin that he dealt with when he was young. And I think it's very interesting. I didn't listen to this whole clip. I was trying to listen to it yesterday, but we were also trying to get ready for brunch for Father's Day and stuff like that. So I wasn't able to listen to this whole clip. But let's listen to this clip together and then let's continue our conversation.
And could keep us away from Christ and this weak rebellious roots. My rebellion took a form of immorality that I don't like to talk about much. I was very sexually immoral as a teenager. And it started early in my life, and it was very easy for me. Now, I'm going to share something with you that I've really had to struggle with sharing the details, things that I'm going to be sharing with you today. But when I say it was easy for me, I was very immoral, and I was immoral a lot. And I can remember a conversation with my friends, and they said, one of them said, "You're just blessed." That's what they said. Because we would go out and meet girls, and I would end up being immoral just in one night. And so they began actually, it's so horrible to share this because of what the word blessed means to me now. And that I've written a book called The Blessed Life, and it's about giving, not taking. And it's about giving to give, not giving to get. So it's the total opposite of the way I was before I met Christ. Here's what I've realized. I was not blessed, I was cursed. There was a curse on my life where immorality came easy for me. In other words, there was a bent toward that. I'm going to show you that the Lord showed me what the root of that curse was. The reason I'm going to show you is because I think if there's a bent toward your life toward a certain sin, maybe God could show you the root, and you could cut the root off and not have that fruit anymore. You understand what I'm saying? I learned to lie and manipulate. Because I also had rejection, I didn't want to be rejected. So I looked for the girls that would be the most susceptible. And I learned how to spot this in girls. Please hear me. There's a reason I'm sharing this.
So it's very sickening when we listen back to this sermon when he says that he looks for girls who are most susceptible, especially knowing now the fact that he was abusing a 12-year-old. But let's just continue.
Hear me, there's a reason I'm sharing this. The very thing, ladies, that the world tells you to give a man before marriage so that you can keep him is the very thing that will cause you to lose him. I looked for girls that did not have a good relationship with their father. I learned to spot that. I looked for girls that were insecure. And I don't know, now I look back on this, I can tell I did it. It wasn't like a plan that I had, but I could spot this. Girls were made to be held by men. And if they are not held, if that need is not met in a healthy way by their father, they will meet it in an unhealthy way.
So listening to this about his struggles from a sexual standpoint, it leads me to believe, and this is just me pondering, it leads me to believe that this probably wasn't the first time that he was involved with an underage girl. This was probably one of many times based on what he's saying and admitting in this sermon. This was probably just the first occurrence that we're hearing about. This is just me pondering. This is just me thinking. This is just my personal opinion based on the data that is being presented to us. All right?
But you need to understand that if a man does not respect you, he cannot love you. He cannot love you. As a matter of fact, fulfilled lust turns to hate. And I wish I had time to show you the whole passage. 2 Samuel 13 talks about Amnon and Tamar, and that Amnon really loved her. He loved her, and that Tamar loved him. But Amnon forces her and rapes her. And then I want to just show you one verse. Really, I'd love for you to read the whole chapter later. Verse 15 says, Then Amnon, this is right after it happens, then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said, Arise and be gone. And she said, No, please don't send me away. And he actually calls a servant and says, Throw this woman out and bolt the door behind her. God meant for us to express love in a healthy way. Because of the lust that was in my life, it has taken years for me to get over the images and the things that I saw that no person should have ever seen. And the appetites that were created in me that God never intended to be created in me. Please understand.
Now, what do you think he could possibly have been talking about in 2014 about the images that no person should see and the appetites that no person should acquire? I think he's speaking of predatorial behavior. I think he was dealing with pedophilic impulses. And it wasn't just impulses, as we've learned. He actually acted on those impulses. And that's why I said it's hard for me to believe that that was the only time. Because things like that typically don't just happen one time. Because your appetite for those types of disgusting behaviors only grows. And clearly we see somebody who was actively in ministry who was also living this lifestyle of pedophilia. So you're going to tell me that before he was in ministry that he wasn't also pursuing this same lifestyle?
That when God says don't, there's a reason. And I'll just give you one quick so that hopefully you'll understand this. in order to have premarital sex, you have to sneak around to do it. And you have to lie, and you have to be deceptive, and you have to be manipulative. For instance, let me just take a teenage couple. When the teenager's about to go out and the parents say, "Where y'all going tonight?" They don't say, "We're going to have sex." So they have to lie. And then when they come back, where'd you go? What'd you do? They have to lie. So you learn to lie. You learn to be deceptive. And you get this feeling in you of adrenaline rush, because you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. But once you get married, you don't have to sneak around anymore. But you've developed an appetite for sneaking around sex, that sex in marriage can never satisfy that appetite, because you don't have to sneak around. And this is why a man will begin to talk to someone at the office and begin to flirt, and he is satisfying, and I'm going to say this in a very strong way, but he's satisfying an appetite that you created in him. And I'm not saying that it's right.
What does that mean?
But I'm trying to get you to understand how important it is not to create an appetite in someone before your marriage. Don't stir up love before it's time, Song of Solomon says. And what will happen is this man will begin to have an affair, and now he's sneaking around. And he'll begin to feel like with her like he felt with you before you got married. And he associates that feeling with love. So he'll begin to think that he loves her and not you. So he divorces you, marries her, and guess what? He doesn't have to sneak around anymore. This is why many men will say, it's just not the same. It's just not the same. And then they will bring things into their sex life that God didn't intend to try to spice it up, quote unquote. And it's not the same, because you create an appetite. I'm telling you that my wife and I, we had to deal with things that we should not have had to deal with because of my sin. And I asked the Lord after I got saved, God, what was the root? Why? You know, they said I was blessed. I know I wasn't blessed. I was cursed. Multiple affairs. And I don't understand this, God. And so what was the root? What was the open door in my life? And I want to show you a scripture I showed you a few weeks ago, but it's going to kind of shock you when you see this. Hebrews 12, verses 15 and 16 says, looking carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. This word means morally defiled. Many, this is my life. What you're reading this verse is my life. Many became morally defiled. Now watch the very next verse, but it's the same sentence, and I just want to take the first 5 words. Lest there be any fornicator. It goes on, or profane person among you. Okay, lest there be a fornicator. Don't let a root of bitterness spring up, or many will be morally defiled, because there will be a fornicator among you. I was the fornicator. And I believe this open door in my life was because there was a root of bitterness in our family. And when I share with you what happened that I've never shared publicly, and I got my mother's permission to share this week.
Okay, so you know what makes what makes things even more interesting? The girl who he was abusing, Cindy, because remember, like I said, and I believe at this time Robert was married, and that's what it says here. In 1981, Cindy and her family met Robert Morris at a youth revival in Tulsa. He was 21 years old, traveling evangelist, married to Debbie, his current wife. Cindy was 11 years old. Her family was involved in many evangelistic. It's Monday, y'all. My reading skills have declined over the weekend. Her family was involved in the church, essentially. Her dad was a pastor, right? They were active in the church. Morris was invited to do a youth revival in her hometown in Oklahoma. After that, he began to regularly preach at their church on Sundays. He would often stay at her home and sometimes bring his wife, Debbie, and their little boy, Josh. Robert and Debbie quickly became family friends, and Cindy viewed them as safe and friendly. So Cindy is the 11-year-old girl who viewed Robert and and his family, his wife and his son, as safe and friendly. Why would she not? She's 11. She sees this family of Christians come into, their city, preaching to the youth. Why would she have any concerns, right? It says their families would often go on trips with each other. All that changed for Cindy on December 25th, 1982, Christmas night. The Morris family came to visit and spend some time there. Cindy sat in the back seat of the car with Robert. He asked her to visit him in his room that night. She shared a room with her sister. Cindy, an innocent 12-year-old girl, movingly described what she was wearing. She was wearing pink pajamas with bloomer pants. She wore underwear underneath. She had a snap-up robe on. She thought nothing of visiting a family friend in their bedroom, so she didn't think anything of it. He told her to lie down on her back and touched her stomach. He told her to close her eyes. Then he touched her breasts and felt under her pants. He warned her to never tell anyone about this because it would ruin everything. She returned to her bedroom and didn't tell her sister what happened. Robert Morris repeated this behavior until 1987, March of 1987. This first happened Christmas night, 1982. He repeated this behavior until March of 87. This would happen in Texas and Oklahoma, and the family would stay at the Morris home in Texas. Her father donated money to Robert's ministry, not realizing what was happening to his daughter. Could you imagine that? Morris wanted to make out and engage in heavy petting. So like touching, like aggressively. He reportedly told Debbie that he was counseling Cindy. Cindy wondered if Debbie was in denial about what was happening. That was my thing. I'm like, how does his wife not know that this is happening under the same roof? Things changed when she turned 16. He would take her out in his car and attempt to have sexual intercourse. Once, he was fixing a vanity in his home and held up a screw and asked Cindy if she wanted to do this. By this time, Morris was a pastor at Shady Grove Church, which would eventually become Gateway Church Grand Prairie campus. The abuse became known to both families. Cindy confided in a close friend, GF, unnamed person who knew both families. Her friend said she needed to tell her parents. Her father was angry and called the head pastor of Shady Grove Church to report Morris. He demanded that Morris get out of ministry, or he would call the sheriff. Morris reportedly stepped down from ministry for 2 years. Cindy received a call from Debbie Morris, who told Cindy that she forgave her. Debbie is a mother. It is inconceivable to me that a mother would blame a 12-year-old child for her husband's abuse. Cindy believes that Robert Morris might have told Debbie it was Cindy's fault. Cindy said things fell apart at this point. Their circle of family friends was no more. 2 years later, Robert returned to Hominy with Debbie, allegedly with James Robinson's blessing. I guess he returns to ministry, allegedly with the father of the girl he was abusing's blessing. The pressure was on, and Robert Morris was aiming for the big time. They told her father that he wanted to get back into ministry. At that point, Her father washed his hands of Morris and no longer interacted with him. Cindy sought counseling for the abuse she endured. I believe that Debbie Morris also contributed to her pain by implying Cindy needed to be forgiven by her. It took over a decade of counseling for her to fully comprehend what happened to her during those 4.5 years of abuse. Cindy sought a financial settlement to help reimburse her for her counseling, but she wouldn't sign an NDA. In 2005, she obtained an attorney to file a lawsuit. Robert Morris's attorney responded by implying that they believed it was her fault because she was flirtatious, quote unquote. She asked for $50,000, which was not much in my estimation. They responded that they would give her $25,000 if she signed an NDA. She refused. So she can now tell her side of the story. Update from June 14th, 2024. Cindy found relevant information in Robert Morris's book, From Dream to Destiny, which was written in 2011. He says he stepped down from the ministry when he was 25 due to issues of pride. He claims he was a security guard at Motel 6. Cindy added that she believed he was a used car salesman as well. The following pages are from the chapter titled The Pride Test. So this is from his book. The Pride Test. It says it was Sunday morning and it's kind of blurry, so forgive me if I'm reading crazy. It was Sunday morning and things were beginning to quiet down at the prayer center for James Robinson's ministry. Phone volunteers were finishing their 5 a.m. shifts and heading off to church. The only two people left to man the phones were myself and Terry Redmond, a good friend who also happens to be the son-in-law of James Robinson. It was an interesting series of events that had led me to the prayer counter that day. Although still in my early 20s, I had already been involved in public ministry for several years. Things had happened pretty fast after I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ at the age of 19. Only 10 months after being saved, I met James Robinson and he asked me to start traveling with him, speaking to junior and senior high school assemblies. So I had not even been a Christian for a year when I began to travel and preach the gospel. Pretty heady stuff for someone so young and even younger in the Lord. Though I started out speaking at public schools, it wasn't long before I was preaching at crusades. Eventually, James was even gracious enough to give me a title, Associate Evangelist. Wow, I was only 20 years old, but because of my association with James, I was already involved in television, preaching to large crowds, and even had the title to prove that. It says he steps out of ministry to take a regular job. So this says, it seemed to me that the favor of God was on everything I touched. What a destiny lay before me. What could stop me now? In retrospect, it's clear that an enemy called pride had began to creep into my life. Slowly, stealthily, thoughts of pride began to take up residence in my mind. Thoughts that could not coexist with a proper reverence for a holy God. By the time I was 25, I had become far too accustomed to hearing people tell me how gifted I was. I began to listen to this praise. Worse, I was beginning to expect it. People would say to me, "You are so gifted, you can do anything." And with all the wisdom of my 25 years, I began to believe them. I started thinking, man, I'm something. I'm successful. Deep down, I knew I was prideful, but I didn't know what to do about it. The more the pride grew, the more it seemed to stand in my way. So I began to pray about it. I asked God for help. I said, God, I know I have pride. I know my insecurities make me vulnerable to it. I need to be free of this, but I don't know what to do. One day I was praying along these lines. I asked the Lord, what can I do about this? Is there anything I can do to deal with the pride in my life? His answer didn't exactly thrill me. I sensed him telling me, well, here's a thought. You could step out of ministry and just take a regular job. I suppose my response didn't exactly thrill him either. I said, yes, that is a thought, Lord. It's a bad thought, but it is a thought. Seriously, though, the religious part of me couldn't imagine that it would be God's will for me to leave the ministry. After all, I was being so used mightily by him. But try as I might, I could not get rid of that thought. It got stronger and stronger until the Lord orchestrated the circumstances for me to step out of ministry. I finally did what the Lord suggested. I stepped out of the ministry and started looking for a real job. So he's saying that the Lord orchestrated for him to assault a 12-year-old so that he could ultimately step out of ministry to better qualify him for the task ahead in ministry. And then it says, after much searching, I finally found a job as a security guard at Motel 6. That was the only job I could get. Now, you must remember, people had told me that I was so gifted that I could do anything. But it didn't take long for me to learn that wasn't true. I learned that without God's blessing, you can't do anything. It is only the blessing of God that causes us to have true success. And so it was that I learned a very important lesson, a lesson I would never have learned without first stepping out of ministry. After a month of working nights as a security guard at Motel 6, I felt I had made great strides towards humility. Huh. It says, immediately after connecting with Cindy, I received a call from a young woman, 30s, who told me that the men in the group would often sit next to her, stroking her hair and commenting about her looks. She spoke to the leaders, but they didn't respond meaningfully, and the uncomfortable behavior continued. She then reported it in a note to the pastoral staff at the church. They did not respond, so she left the church. I wonder if the church does not take complaints like this seriously due to their experiences. So my question is, at this point in time, he was already in ministry, right? He was already in ministry. He's abusing a 12-year-old while he's married under the same roof that his wife is in, that his son is in. He's abusing a 12-year-old under the same roof that her parents are in. Her father also in ministry. And he's abusing a 12-year-old under the same roof. Why did he go back to ministry at all after that? Who permitted him to go back into ministry at all after that situation? This is somebody who was actively in ministry, was actively growing ministry, specifically youth ministry, and was abusing a pastor's 12-year-old daughter under his roof, under the very roof that he opened up the door for his wife and son to sleep during the time that they would travel to preach the gospel. And he's abusing his 12-year-old daughter. And then, according to the book, he didn't leave because of the abuse that he was inflicting on the 12-year-old. He left because of quote unquote pride. And God orchestrated a way for him to leave ministry in order to further prepare him and equip him for a greater destiny to glorify the Lord. That sounds like a bunch of bullcrap. That sounds like a bunch of bullcrap. Why was he allowed back into ministry after that took place in the first place? That's my question. This is where we need elders who are biblical, who really stand on the biblical truth and aren't just looking for somebody who can raise funding for their church. I'm sure that ain't the first time that's happened. Ain't no way you could be struggling with that level of perverted attraction and that be the first time that that's happened. As a married man with kids, that ain't the first time that that happened. And then you want to come back and say, oh, we'll give you $25,000 if you signed an NDA. If you sign an NDA, how about just remove the perverted pastor out of the church and give her the $50K that she's asking for to reimburse her for the counseling for the pain and trauma inflicted by your pastor? Disgusting. It says Robert Morris, his friend Chris Hodges, and various leaders rule the ARC. Did you know there is a concern about fallen pastors in the ARC? What's that? In this video, they discuss restoring fallen leaders. What is this video about?
One of the crises a senior pastor might find himself in, and you each may have a experience.
1 second. Let me see what the date is on this video.
With this
7 years ago.
Is a leader who has fallen. What would you say to the church of how we should respond to leaders who have fallen, and how should we restore leaders who have fallen? What would your insight and comment be into that?
With a spirit of gentleness, considering ourselves, lest we also be tempted. Right? Galatians 6:1. Go ahead, Chris.
No, that's. I don't think there's a set way for every situation. I think every situation presents a different response, and of course, their response to the whole process dictates a lot of that. My only observation on restoration of leaders that I can say, like, so I went through one, helped someone through one, and in preparation for it, actually studied over 2,000 cases to find out what worked and what didn't. And the one common denominator in the ones that weren't working is that there was no clear path. So that people who go through that, there's such a sense of hopelessness because they're right in the middle of losing everything, that if you don't show here's the way out and make the steps clear, they get so despondent, they make even worse decisions, and their attitude gets bad, and they'll flip the whole thing and turn into they'll make themselves the victim, and it's crazy how many times that has happened. So the one thing that I think that eliminates that is that, okay, here's what happened, and here are the steps, and if you follow through with all of these steps with a great heart and attitude, and you complete them, then here's what we give you on the other end of this. Here's what we're going to lead you through. I think restoration has to have a clear path. So, yeah.
That's good. That's good. Anything to add?
Well, just as Chris just made the best point you'll probably ever hear on restoring a fallen leader, and that is if he has a clear path and a goal, and then he said it just the perfect way, and you do this path with the right heart and right attitude. So that's the other thing is that the reason most restorations don't work is because the person himself.
But you yourself, you yourself didn't have the right heart and the right attitude. It says that they were trying to blame the 12-year-old for being flirtatious. She's 12. She's a 12-year-old.
Or herself pulls out of it. And so you want to give them that clear path, you want to give them that. But then also what I would say first is you do want to do it yourself with a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself lest you also be tempted. And I think when we say to them and we use that gentleness, and we even have to, if we have to dress it, no matter how far you have to dress it, how wide you have to dress it, that's different in every case. But you do it with a humble heart and a humble spirit and bring God into the situation on your side and on the other person's side. I've seen fallen leaders restored many, many, many times. It really can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, I've seen both of you do that so well with showing grace without compromising truth, and they're not exclusive of each other. And you have.
Okay, I'm done with these clowns. Let me know what y'all think in the comments, man. Do you think he should be a pastor right now today? I would say no. I think they should have removed him way back when that happened, when he was in ministry and was doing those heinous acts with a 12-year-old. That's when they should have removed him and said, bro, go find something else to do. I heard they giving out plumber certificates at the community college. Go see if that's going to be something that's going to be good for you. No, I'm not trying to, no knock on plumbers. Y'all work very hard and make an honest living. That's just the first thing that came to my mind. But he should not be in ministry. So that's my take on this. I'd love to know what y'all think about this, to see if y'all disagree with me or not. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. All right, I'm out.